Hi guys, welcome to another BigLipz podcast. My name is Catherine Reese. Joined with me is my good friend Sam Macaulay Blair, and
Hello.
as always, we are here to basically just talk about film. So, for those who don't know, we're kind of former and current film students. We basically decided to just there wasn't enough talk about movies out there, so we thought we would add our own takes on things. Probably not the most original at times, but here we are. So for this episode, we're going to be just doing a kind of review of 2021 movies, because I feel like a review of the year would be dreadful. So we're just going to talk about movies and our experiences with movies during this year. So this year's a weird one as well, because there was a certain period of time at the start where the cinemas weren't open and movies were being delayed. So yeah, I think this one, sections are going to be a wee bit shorter than normal, just because we've got a bit more to talk about. But I think we'll just jump right in if you're good, Sam.
I am indeed.
Awesome. So we'll start with, what was your favourite releases of 2021?
Cool. So my standout favourite, and I think I kind of hinted at this a few times. I can't remember how I outright said it on one of these podcasts, but I know that I talked about, I think in the last one we did, the fact that usually I get really hyped for all these big blockbuster films, all these franchise movies, naturally, because sequels are easy to get excited about because you know the world, you know the character, you know the rules.
Yeah, you kind of know what's coming, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. There's something that they can build, hang the hype on. Whereas with independent films, I try and avoid as much promotion as possible, because if it's a completely new experience, I find that generally the better experiences I have are the ones where I go in knowing as little as possible. My favorite movie of 2020, as again I'm sure I have mentioned, is The Lighthouse. Which just completely blew me away. I knew very, very little about that going in. I'd heard that it was good, but I'd also had a friend that'd seen it who hated it. I think I knew Robert Pattinson was in it, and he was supposed to be brilliant in it. I don't think I even knew Willem Dafoe was in it until I was sitting in the cinema, and he came on the screen.
That's Willem Dafoe.
Yeah, exactly. Almost missed him. And yeah, my favorite film of this year, my absolute top of the pick, is another film that I had zero hype and zero knowledge of really before going to see it, or before seeing it, and that is The Green Knight, the film by David Lowry, which I just I'd had the only thing I knew about it to begin with was I'd had a couple friends message me complaining about the fact that it had been delayed because of it was delayed just in the UK. I think it had been released internationally, and then they delayed it in the UK because of the Delta variant of coronavirus. So I had friends message me about that, saying that they were really annoyed, and I was like, what is The Green Knight? I've never heard of this film before, and I don't think they told me that much. To be fair, I think they just said it stars Dave Patel, it's supposed to be really good. I saw Empire gave it 5 stars, but I kind of missed. I think they did get a cinema release here, but when I was looking at times, I tried to find a screening of it in Liverpool, and I think there was the Everyman Cinema was the only one showing it when I was looking, and it was 13 quid a ticket. And there was a movie that I just watched that had also got loads of 5-star reviews and loads and loads of praise, which I will talk about later on in the podcast, because I was incredibly unimpressed by it, and I was like, well, I don't really want to spend £13 on a movie that I really might not enjoy. It's getting a lot of positive acclaim. There's every chance that I will, but I don't know for sure. And then I saw that it was on Amazon Prime, so I was like, stuff it, I'm just gonna watch it on that. And it absolutely blew me away. I recommend it to anyone I get the chance to. I absolutely loved the film. It was a very, it just felt like a very original and a very contained piece of cinema that is both artistic but also interesting. It's sort of a fantasy with I guess leanings into sort of horror as well. It just feels very unique. And it has something that it wants to say, and I think it does a really good job saying it. So yeah, The Green Knight is the very, very top for me. Other ones that I wanted to mention, obviously the franchise films of the year for me would be the latest Spider-Man, which was a surprisingly solid movie. That was actually like just really really strongly made. On top of like, there was a lot of like fan service, but the actual movie itself I thought was really well done. The writing was really strong. I think there was a lot of like good direction and stuff. Acting was brilliant. So really enjoyed Spider-Man. Really really dug No Time to Die, James Bond film. Which was very controversial. But yeah, no, I really really liked what they did with it. Phoebe Waller-Bridges touched up the script. I don't know, like obviously I don't know the exact extent like that she like of her writing, of her work on the sort of script. I know that she was brought in like quite late on. But I'm pretty sure she did say that she, helped them refine like sort of all aspects of it. But the writing I thought was really sharp. A lot of the characters were really sort of strong, sort of quirky as well. So I think she really added a lot to it. Again, I thought the direction was like superb. And I just thought it felt like it knew exactly the film it wanted to be, and I thought it did a really good job delivering that. Again, it has been a bit of a controversial release, but I like all the things that seem to have like annoyed people. I really like about it. Basically, it's what makes me dig the film. It felt like a much more original Bond film than I was expecting it to be from the marketing. So it was a very nice surprise. Dune was obviously another one, which utterly like I mean I was very very hyped for that. I really just wanted to see it on like the biggest screen possible with like the best sound, and it was exactly the way to see it because it is just like such a good audio visual experience. And I was really impressed that like Denis Villeneuve is really good for making stories that don't really rely too much on dialogue, and I thought it did a really good job of like establishing this universe but doing as little as possible with like dialogue and heavy exposition.
There's nothing worse in like a kind of fantasy movie or things like or sci-fi or anything where they just is so clunky and they're just obviously explaining to the audience and it's just painful to listen to.
Exactly, yeah, and it just kills all like rewatch value basically because like you just the movie just becomes fact rather than like any sort of interesting fiction. And then the last two that I kind of wanted to mention, one of which is arguably not a movie, but I only watched it because it was on a website's top like 20 movies of the year article, and it was their number one pick. So that was what made me like go on Netflix and watch it. But Bo Burnham's Inside.
And he brought it out. Sorry, just in like the kind of height of the pandemic and that, didn't he?
Like a few months ago, I think maybe 6 months ago, like in the summertime. But yeah, he basically just made the whole thing himself in his like shed, and it's crazy how like entertaining it is because it is just one guy in a room by himself for like an hour and a half. And it's funny, it's really well like made, and it also is very very relatable in a lot of sort of painful ways. It captures the sort of essence of like what everyone has gone through with like lockdowns and the pandemic and stuff really really well, I thought. So yeah, I really really dug that. And then the last one I wanted to mention was something that came out way back at the start of the year, and again was something that I went in basically completely blind to, and that's Palm Springs. Have you seen it?
Yes, I think I watched it on your recommendation.
Did you? Brilliant. Yeah, I went in completely blind to that, and to begin with, really didn't like it as well. Like the opening, like I was not enjoying at all, and then the movie kind of like reveals what it's actually like doing, what the story actually is, and I was so impressed at just like how like well the story sort of unfolded and how sort of serious it took itself at points. I thought it did a really good job of like. It's a comedy, but at the same time, like it has moments of drama that it lets land, it lets sit, and yeah, it's not a premise that's like totally unique, but it felt like it was doing it in a really unique way. So yeah, I absolutely love that film. So those are my picks. What about yours?
Yeah, very interesting. Funnily enough, I have actually only seen one of your picks, which is shocking that I'm embarrassed about. I can't even think of an excuse as to why I've not seen half the movies, but I'll get on it. I mean, my excuse for Bond is that I'm not a massive Bond fan, Spider-Man, I haven't seen any Tom Holland ones actually. I
Yeah,
don't think.
yeah, that's-
No, yeah. I think I've only
That's also-
I've seen like 2 Tobey Maguire and 1 Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, and that's
Is very much made for people who have watched like as many Spider-Man movies as they can.
yeah, fair. But no, they were really interesting. I think few of my choices were ones that kind of stuck out for me when I was trying to remember. One of them actually was a Quiet Place 2.
Oh, nice.
I mean, at the same time, I do think it was a bit needless. I definitely think it could have been a standalone movie. But for what it was definitely a good watch. It did have it did definitely have the same kind of like ominous tone and feeling as the original or the first one. But I think it was good because it was the story was similar, and people always kind of moan that they've replaced one bearded white guy with another bearded white guy, which is a fair point, but at the same time they're playing different roles.
Yeah.
I liked as well it kind of expanded Emily Blunt into this kind of like badass mum woman.
Yeah.
Which was very good, very fun to watch. I really like Emily Blunt. I thought as well the scares when they were there were really good, same as the first movie. And A Quiet Place is really good. I can't remember if I think we've spoken about it before, but they're really good at using jump scares like sparingly. So
Yeah.
where maybe other people would make it where it was jump scares every 3 seconds.
I feel like as well the whole premise of that does actually lend itself to jump scares. Like, I feel like there's an inbuilt justification for having jump scares because it relies on silence for so much of it, and it makes you lean in so much. And again, probably because it does it sparingly as well, I feel like it would be nearly impossible or almost ridiculous to make those movies without having at least one jump scare, because if you have a movie that relies so much on like there being next to no noise, you're gonna have points where there's suddenly a loud noise.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a movie where even like someone speaking could be a jump scare. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because there's been silence for so long.
Exactly. I think in the first one, there's one of the early points in the movie. There's a jump scare when they knock over like a lantern or something when they're playing like a board game.
Oh yeah,
So they do that. I mean, it is like a trope to have like jump scares that aren't jump scares, but in that case, it is still a jump scare because like any noise is dangerous.
Yep. And that's, I think, is that not the wee boy that knocks that over as well? And he continues his trend of being annoying and useless at the same time in the second movie. Although I feel like
nothing
we
is
should,
not consistent. At least.
yeah, I feel like we should cut him some slack because at the same time he is a child, and that is a bit pretty like an actually unprecedented situation where
Yeah, fair.
you know what I mean. Cut him some slack. We can't all be Emily Blunt.
Sadly.
I know. Speaking of Emily Blunt, another movie which I really enjoyed this year was the Jungle Cruise movie.
Oh wow!
Have you seen it?
That.
No.
No, I've not.
I feel like people tend to compare it to The Mummy, which is a very fair comparison because it's very similar. It's very much like an updated version of The Mummy.
Okay, nice.
But I feel like everyone loves The Mummy for a reason because it's fun. Jungle Cruise had this as well. It's just fun. There's a lot of adventure. It's pretty funny. I mean, I love the Jungle Cruise ride. I think it's so funny. It's just full of one-liners. And the movie did have them, but not quite as much as I would have enjoyed. I think as well, Disney's done it again where they've taken a ride. I think the ride's something like 12 minutes, 17 minutes long, the ride or whatever, and they've made a 2-hour movie out of it. And I think they did it pretty well because the main story is not included in the ride, but it kind of fits with the like their starting point of the ride. It kind of fits with that, and it makes sense. It didn't feel like they just wanted to make a movie and then slotted in the Jungle Cruise somehow.
Yeah, fair.
I think as well, one thing that surprised me about the Jungle Cruise was how much I enjoyed Jack Whitehall and Jack Whitehall's character, because I'm not normally the biggest fan of Jack Whitehall, and it's funny because I know a few people who've said that and then they watched the movie and they're like, do you know what, he was actually really good in that.
You're talking me into seeing it now, to be fair.
Yeah.
It's not one that I had on my radar at all. I mean, heard like some semi-positive things when it came out, but nothing like overwhelming. But that's an interesting one.
I mean, it's not like life changing or anything, but it's such a good time. I'll give it that.
Oh, yeah,
It's
sometimes.
Yeah, it's one of those movies where the more you get into it, the more you're gonna enjoy it, basically.
Yeah, fair.
And then another movie I wanted to mention was actually the movie Candyman. And this is a weird one because
Oh.
it wasn't, again, maybe not like the best movie I've ever seen in my life, but it was another one I had kind of gone. I hadn't seen the original, but I was kind of excited to see it. Jordan Peele's name was obviously attached to it, which I think is kind of why I wanted to go. But I think it did a really good job of it. Kind of took itself a wee bit more seriously.
Yeah.
There was a lot. It was good for a horror movie. There was a lot of gore. There was a nice amount of jump scares. It was pretty scary. I think for people, I was telling my cousin about it. She's slightly older than I am, but she said that when she was young, Candyman was really big. So she said she wouldn't even go and see it because it was like the story itself had horrified her so much.
Wow.
So I think going like for something like that was really cool, and it also had this really really nice kind of animated section that kind of reminded me of the bit in Harry Potter with the Tale of the Three Brothers.
Yeah, the Deathly Hallows.
Yes, it was a very similar kind of style, and it was such a nice way of like not clunky exposition because they were basically retelling the story of the first movie. So yeah, those were my choices. I think Candyman, even if you haven't seen the first one, is a good watch on its own. But I think it was more fun because after I'd watched that, I went back and watched the original.
Yeah, because the original's on Netflix, isn't it?
Yeah, there's some crazy jump scares in the original. Like I almost fell off my seat.
I'll need to watch it. I'll make a point of actually watching it soon because I was on Netflix today just for the purpose of this.
Yeah.
Because I was going through like things that I'd watched just to see if there's anything that I'd forgotten about that I'd watched this year on Netflix, and then realised that Candyman was on my list. And I did actually think to myself, I was like, oh, I've been meaning to watch that. I forget because I never, with there being like multiple streaming platforms. I think me and my flatmate will watch like bits of things every now and again, and usually we just go to is like opening Disney Plus.
Yeah.
And I think because there was like a few shows on that we watched, and now we just like habitually open it, and that's so I never open Netflix, and then I always miss the stuff that's on my list as a result.
Yeah,
so
no,
I'll make
I'm
a point.
100% the same.
I'll actually write that down so that I watch Candyman soon because I am keen, and as you mentioned with Jordan Peele's name attached, it's definite intrigue there because I am a fan, as we mentioned last time.
Yep.
But yeah, I like your picks.
Cool, thank you. Moving swiftly on, are there any 2021 releases that you didn't enjoy or that you really thought were just terrible, that you maybe had high hopes for, and they were dashed?
I don't think any of the... So there's just 3 movies that I didn't enjoy to the point that it's worth talking about them, I think. But I didn't have like crazy high hopes for any of them. Maybe the one that was like the most disappointing, and even then it wasn't very, was The Eternals.
Okay.
So I mean, I said something good about Marvel films, and I was I'm gonna do the opposite. I went to see Eternals like with a bunch of friends. Like weekend it came out. It wasn't, we weren't like, oh my god, we need to go see Eternals. Like we were all very hungover and we had time to kill, and we were like, checked what was on the cinema, and we were like, oh, the Eternals is out. Went to go see it, and it is such a long movie, and it was just not that good.
Was it the same woman that did Nomadland? Is that right?
Yeah.
What a genre switch. Yeah, we've spoken about her before.
Yeah. I think me and Chloe Zhao we're not two peas in a pod. I don't seem to dig our filmmaking that much because I was not crazy on Nomadland, and I was not crazy on Eternals. Nomadland, if that even counts, I guess it does for us because we watched it earlier this year, is another one for sure that I watched with, again, thinking that one I actually had more hype for because it had won Best Picture and Best Director, and I was like, okay, I'm excited to see what this is. And
that's that's so funny that you mentioned that because I didn't even remember. Like that's how much it was just like almost indifference.
I mean, I'd forgotten until you'd mentioned that she did the same thing. I was talking about one of her other films without even realising that, like, her previous film I also hadn't enjoyed. So, yeah, I think, again, the cinematography in Eternals was really nice. And I did really appreciate, like, the diversity that they like, go for in it, because the movie is diverse as all hell. Like, it is, like, crazy diverse. And I really respected that about it. But, yeah, the movie was just like all over the place. It's so long, and you don't even get like proper closure. And there's just some really dumb things that happen in it as well. Literally the highlight of going to see the film was about halfway through the film, a kid got out of his seat. He was sitting on the right hand side of the cinema, and the entrance was on the left, and ran all the way down to the front and along and all the way up because he wanted to go pee. And then he came back a few minutes later and ran all the way back. Again, he could. There was like a quicker route he could have taken, but he clearly didn't want to miss like a second of the film. And all of us
amazing.
like just stopped, watched him go, and just like could not stop laughing. And that genuinely was like, for all of us, was the best bit of the movie.
That's
So,
a bad sign when someone in the audience is more entertaining than the movie.
It's I mean, I think it was like during the final like climactic showdown was like just beginning, and I went up to go pee, and I just didn't even care. I was like, anything could be like, I don't, whatever the stakes are in this film, I don't care. I don't care what like is gonna happen with the character. And I came back, and I don't think I asked at any point like, what did I miss, because I just like, it doesn't matter.
Who cares?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, the Eternals was definitely a letdown. Another one that I really didn't enjoy, but I really wasn't crazy on, but I also didn't really like, only went to see it because me and a friend couldn't decide on what to see, and he suggested it, and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll go along to see it. It was Venom 2.
That was my first choice as well.
Yeah, like I had absolutely zero interest in seeing it. I hadn't seen the first one, and nothing about the second one had appealed to me. Like I didn't like watch any trailers or anything, but nothing about it. The only thing that had me in any way interested was that Andy Serkis had directed it. But yeah, the film was just bland. It was just so bland.
It was very bland. I was dragged to see the first one in the cinema as well, and that was marginally better, but this one was just so... I've written here in my notes actually that Michelle Williams has forgotten how to act, because she's a good actress. I don't know what she was doing in that movie.
I watched I think it was Honest Trailers did a video on Venom 2, and I watched that, and there's a brilliant bit in that where they edit out Venom's voice.
I've seen that,
So
and it's just him, like Tom Hardy, just staring at Michelle Williams.
Yeah, just for like the longest time. And then she, I think, eventually says something, but it's just like, without obviously Venom's bit, you do realise how like weird it does seem, and like weird to the point that it is really odd that no like character ever like calls him out on it properly. But yeah, Venom 2 was just, I mean, again, like I didn't have any interest in seeing it, so it wasn't like I wasn't burned by Venom 2. I wasn't like attached to the property in any way, but yeah, it was pretty much as meh as I thought it was going to be. And then the last one that I had was a movie that I watched, I think on Prime, and I watched it with my ex, who I convinced to watch. I convinced her to watch it with me because I'd seen people talking about it on Twitter, raving about it, and then one of my best friends had said as well. He was like, I just watched this film. I really recommend it. It's on Amazon Prime.
Oh no.
And so I was like, let's just give it a chance. She was like, what's it about? I was like, I don't know. I was like, all I've heard is that it's good. It's all I need to know. Let's just stick it on, see what like we'll just take the movie as it comes. And it's I Care a Lot with Rosamund Pike and Peter Dinklage.
Okay. I haven't even heard of that, I don't think.
Yeah, it took me a while to remember that I'd even watched it, to be honest. It was very forgettable. It was just like, it was annoying more than anything else, because it felt like the premise of a good movie was in there, but they just didn't utilise it. It's like, so it starts off, and she plays this character who basically, I'm actually struggling to remember like the details of it now. She plays this character who... she basically takes advantage of old people. She gets them declared like inept effectively, so that they get their like people. She targets old people with like no like family members, and whatnot. She gets them like declared like, I can't remember what the name for it is.
Is
but
it so she
basically
can get
they
like
can't-
power of attorney?
Basically, she gets all their assets. She gets like all their. She legally gets to seize their like house, all their like money, etc. So she just like is this total parasite that preys on old people, and she does this to this old woman, and it turns out this old woman has a son who's played by Peter Dinklage, who is like the head of the mafia, and then it becomes a bit like Rosamund Pike and Peter Dinklage like sparring, and them like sort of battling, and it's just like she's deliberately like a really unsympathetic, like really horrible character, but the movie also kind of expects you to root for her, which is really weird. And it never convinced me that like she should have been dead from the very second that Peter Dinklage's mob set his sights on her.
Yeah, if he's a
but-
mafia boss, like, who's she?
Literally,
Just
like,
a swindler.
But yeah, exactly. But the movie's trying to go for this, so she's a really strong character and she can like outwit him. But again, it shouldn't come down to that. Like, she should have just been plugged immediately.
Yeah, just brute
and-
force, just a drive by.
Yeah, exactly. Because yeah, she's not like well armed. But yeah, like it's this really weird, because at times it's trying to be like funny and kind of silly, but then other times it's trying to be like really dramatic and serious, and then it feels like it thinks it's being a lot more clever than it is. And I think the more interesting movie was, because it seemed at one point like what was going to happen was she obviously gets this woman declared like, you know, incompetent like mentally or whatever, so she gets put in a home, and this woman is obviously fine mentally. So it seemed like there was going to be a battle of the wits where, you know, maybe she finds like a loophole, and I thought they were going down that route where it was going to be like, okay, they're both trying to use the system against each other, and they're trying to like outsmart one another, and it's like a sort of mental chess game. And I was like, that would have been a really, really interesting film, but it's not that. It's just like a really silly version, because it's just like, that's what it seems like it's going to be, and then it's like, oh no, but what if her son was like head of the mafia? And you're just like, okay. So yeah, we were both pretty disappointed with that one, and I felt very guilty.
There's nothing worse than when you recommend a movie that you've not even seen. Like, we've spoken about it before when I dragged my pal to see Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, and the whole time I was like, I'm sorry, I'm really sorry about this.
Yeah, because then I think that's the thing. Like, I think if I hadn't like made someone else watch I Care a Lot, I don't think I would even like. I don't think it would bother me as much.
You don't think you would care
lack
a
of
lot?
quality. Yeah. Nice. That was very nice. I genuinely wouldn't. But I think it's that added guilt of like subjecting someone else to do it, and like genuinely talking them into something that I put a lot of faith in. So those are my picks.
Very good picks.
What were yours?
I think,
Thank you.
funnily enough, the first one of mine was Venom. I think exactly what you've said. I think one of the weirdest part I feel was Woody Harrelson and his wife and their complete nothingness in the movie. Like, they weren't a particular threat really to anyone, were they? They were just a bit of an annoyance. She didn't even get to use her power because Woody Harrelson couldn't hack her screaming. Like, it just seemed like an absolute waste of time, of everyone's time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it felt
I
like,
completely agree.
yeah, it felt like he wasn't even, like, Venom wasn't even really fussed about what Carnage was doing. Like, Tom Hardy was away having his own little battle about his career going down the drain, I think. I can barely remember. Yeah, so it just felt like it was almost like two different movies. And because the first movie at the very least had there was an actual villain, and it was someone that you could see and be like, yep, I can see why Eddie/Venom was trying to stop this. But this movie was like, nah, Eddie's just having a bit of a crisis, and Carnage is just
and even
going insane.
Yeah, because there was a long setup as well. Like, Carnage doesn't even like become Carnage until like most of the way through the movie, and even the whole setup of like he keeps calling like Tom Hardy back to jail to talk to him was just like really weird, because it literally just felt like that was happening because the movie needed to get those characters together rather than it being something that Because every time it was like, why is Tom Hardy going, and why is he even being invited there? And there's like a really like weak justification for it.
Yeah, and there's that amazing thing in that movie thing where the prisoner for some reason gets to dictate. I'm like, he's not giving any information to the police or anything. I can't see why they would. Do you know what I mean? Like, give in to his whatever whim he had.
Yeah, exactly. They don't need to do it. They don't owe him anything.
No.
I think one of the weirdest things about him as a villain for me as well was what was it? Because he loses it when they're in the church and they're facing off. What is it? He's I can't remember what exactly he says to Tom Hardy, to Eddie. As you said, very forgettable film. But it's something to do with his backstory, and I think he says something about he's like, oh, no one cares about the fact that I was like beaten by like my parents. But when he says something along those lines, it's like, there's part of my backstory where I was a victim, and like no one ever talks about that. It's like the gist of what he's saying. But the thing that like got me when he said that was I was like, right. In this movie, the backstory of yours that we have heard came from you. You told us your backstory and you omitted those details. You literally left that out of your own story. So what are you talking about?
Yeah, if someone told me a story about when they were young, they went and I think they pushed his granny down the stairs and then he shot his mum or something. If someone told me that, I'd be like, you're a bad guy.
Exactly. And then afterwards he's like, oh, but what I didn't tell you was that I was abused. Like, you chose not to tell me that. Like, you chose to focus on the bad things you did.
Yeah, you had plenty of time to tell him.
Exactly. So yeah, that was one of the weirdest things that the movie tried to do, was like try and get like some sympathy for the villain at the end.
Yeah, so that they were almost desperately trying to get some sympathy so that his death would almost be like almost like a martyrdom. I'm like, no, he's just exactly. Not amazing. It was funny when you were talking about your second pick. It's almost exactly the way I felt about my second pick, which is the movie Woman in the Window with Amy Adams was in it.
Don't even know what that is.
It was I think it was a book, and then it could be a Prime movie, I think, or Netflix, I can't remember. But I had kind of seen the trailers and I was like, ooh, that looks pretty good. Basically, just kind of like bog standard story where this woman, she thinks that she's seen a crime and then everyone's making her out to be like a nut job, like, oh, you didn't actually see that, you're making things up, blah, blah, blah. And the whole way through, I kept trying to keep the faith to be like, oh, it is going to be good, it's going to be really good. And then it was very predictable and it was just very like far too long for what it was trying to do. And they kept, like, obviously she had this kind of mysterious backstory that we didn't know about it, but it was told in such little tiny dribs and drabs that you didn't care. Like, by the time you got the next piece of information, you were like, why is that relevant? And then you'd be like, oh, because blah, blah, blah. The weirdest thing about it, though, I felt like it was a little bit dated. Like, it felt like it could have been brought out in the 90s, or was it 90s? I'm not sure. When movies like Fatal Attraction and I can't remember what it's called. There's one with Harrison Ford, which is kind of similar. It's got the same kind of vibe. Sleeping with the Enemy as well. It would have fitted in very well in that kind of era, but it, like you were saying about your other movie, I think it was trying to be, and it thought it was being more clever than it actually was.
Yeah. It's rough when you watching a film do that.
Yeah, and Amy Adams was trying her hardest, and there was another it was a pretty good cast. I can't remember. Julianne Moore was in it as well, but it was just, and then at the end sequence got a bit kind of like 90s horror movie as well. So it just, the whole thing felt very dated and confusing. So
fair.
Maybe we'd give that a miss if you were thinking about it, if you come across it.
I've never even heard of it, but I will remember that.
Yeah. So moving on, what was your best 2021 movie moment? So that can be like a particular good time you had in the cinema or in your house with your pals or whatever.
I think honestly, like thinking about this, the first thing that came to mind, we have talked about this on the podcast before. In fact, we had a podcast basically dedicated to it. But going to see Godzilla vs. Kong was just the best time, because
Yeah.
like actually being in a cinema after not being able after like watching loads of movies at home and not being able to be in a cinema for so long, and going to see a movie that like otherwise I really wouldn't have cared about, but was just like silly excited for because of like the spectacle of it.
Yeah.
And I've never I don't think I've ever had a movie experience like it where I've sat and I have cared so little about like what is being said, about what's actually happening
Yep.
on the screen. But I am just loving the presentation of it all. And I was just like, I had a stupid grin on my face the whole time.
100%.
I've never
Like,
just
I don't think I'll ever watch Godzilla versus Kong again.
yeah, no, exactly the same, to be honest. And I don't think I think yeah, because I know that I would never enjoy it anywhere near as much as I did the first time.
Yep.
Like
100%.
it's just I had that one done experience, and it was like perfect as is, and I never need to revisit it. But yeah, that for me was like honestly right at the top of like my sort of movie going experience. Obviously, going to see Lord of the Rings marathon again. We had a podcast where we talked
Yep.
about these things. That was another like absolutely amazing experience, just because like movies that I've seen on a big screen before, but I've never actually done like the Lord of the Rings marathon, and it was such a fun way to do it. I went to see Shang-Chi, the Marvel movie, when I just got out of isolation from having COVID. That was also quite a nice experience, to be honest. Again, just like actually just like the sort of taste of freedom, and just being in this like dark room, sat like right at the front, and again it was just like a really really good time, and I just went by myself as well. I just wanted to go by myself. I just wanted to go, and just go to the cinema by myself, and absolutely loved that. And then I'm trying to think what else. I mean, I won't go into details because it is massively spoilery, even though you don't care about James Bond. But the most controversial part of No Time to Die, I really really liked, because it again I like that they actually like did what I like what they where they took the story basically, what they did with it, and it annoyed a lot of people. But again, like I remember talking, because obviously No Time to Die was supposed to come out like the start of 2020, and was
That's funny
delayed
because
and delayed and delayed.
someone gave me like
It's
a
okay.
play-by-play of the plot, so I know the story and the spoilers and stuff. And after he told me, I was like, yeah, maybe maybe it was a good thing that it was postponed.
um, no, I loved it. Like my one worry, not my one worry, but a big worry that I had with before the movie came out was the movie just looked way too, like from the marketing, it looked way too sort of familiar, way too similar to like other Bond movies, other Daniel. I mean, I've only seen the Daniel Craig ones, but it looked just like the plot of it looked way too similar, and I was really pleasantly surprised at how much it sort of differentiated itself from like other Bond films, and how much it was kind of like pushing against like the expectations of like what a Bond film is, and yeah, like I just again was like very pleasantly surprised by that one. Like I like things of I like like the franchise is like trying to evolve, and isn't just like clinging, because I mean Bond is as a character, as a concept, is a very very like outdated. I mean naturally it began a very long time ago, so
Yeah.
they do need to reinvent it, and obviously there's a big reinvention coming with obviously there being a new Bond being cast like probably sometime next year. But yeah, it was quite cool to just see them do so many new things with No Time to Die. And then other than that, I think maybe just like small moments from movies. There's a line in they referenced a line in the new Spider-Man movie, which is literally became a meme. It's a line from like the first Spider-Man movie where Norman Osborn says, "I'm something of a scientist myself," and he says it again in the new one, and that just absolutely floored me, because it's like,
Yeah.
it's so like cyclical, but like at the same time, I was like, it really really got me, because I did not see it coming at all. There was I went to see the Suicide Squad with a friend, and they had like I think they had like two credit scenes in that, as like superhero movies do, and one of them I absolutely loved because I'd accidentally predicted it while making a joke to a friend earlier in the movie. So that was like another moment that I just like absolutely loved. And then I guess like if I was going to mention any other, seeing Dune in IMAX again was like another, because I kept getting nervous. That had also been delayed by like a year. That was another one that I was like, I feel like I need to see this movie on the biggest screen possible, and I'd be really gutted if like I have to watch it on like a streaming service or on DVD.
Yeah.
And actually managing to see it in IMAX, I was just like over the moon.
Yeah, I can imagine, because I haven't seen the movie, but I've read the kind of start of the book, and even like from the book is very like the whole point of the kind of planet that they're on is that it's so kind of like spanning and barren.
Exactly. Exactly. And yeah, I think there's a scene about halfway through the movie where they first like properly encounter the worms. And I mean, Denis Villeneuve is really good at like sort of capturing the sense of scale, and they obviously use the IMAX format for like those sections, and it just I remember sitting in the cinema and just being like, this is brilliant. Like, this is exactly what you want from like a cinema experience. You want to see something that just feels massive, where you're getting like the full sense of scale, where you're actually like, the movie is like properly captivating, where it feels so unique to cinema. And that scene alone, I was like, this justifies it being a movie, you know, like this justifies the adaptation, because it's something that does exist on the pages, has existed on the page for so many years, but to actually see it realized like properly on a big screen was just like really cool. And I've not read the book, but I still like, you get all the love that is there for the source material, like it absolutely translates on the screen. And that for me was just like such a great experience. So what were yours?
So obviously Godzilla vs. Kong, but as we've spoken about that before. Another one that we've spoken at length before, so I'll just mention it briefly. Of course, Jaws. How could I don't think I mentioned Jaws last podcast, so I had to bring it up this one.
I did though.
You did, yeah. It was the funniest part, and my absolute favourite part of that is that we had just been talking not long before about how that was a movie that I was just dying to see in the cinema, and it was just, the stars aligned and it was just perfect. I think as well, it wasn't even like seeing the movie, it was that moment where I saw it coming together, and it was like, I think it was at night time so I could get to go, I wasn't at work, because so often, like, you know, you'll know what it's like when there's a movie that you're dying to see, or a re-release, and it's of course in the middle of your working day. Yeah. And then another one I just wanted to mention quickly was, we spoke about it last podcast, was when me and my bestie do our Christmas day, where we just sit and watch Christmas movies all day. That was really fun. We did that this year. And I think what made it even nicer was similar to your story, is that I had just come out of isolation. The day before, so we got to do it, and then we were just sitting there and we had the tree up, and then we were wrapping presents for a wee bit. And we watched a couple of movies that we hadn't seen either, because normally we just rotate, like we were talking about last podcast, so we'd watched a few new movies, we watched the classics, of course, just stuffed our face and felt Christmassy, and it was great.
Sounds delightful, to be honest.
Yeah, it was good. 10 out of 10 would recommend. But I feel the only thing was we only got to watch 4 movies, which by our standard isn't as good as it has been previous years.
What's your standard usually? I was going to say 4 is quite a lot, to be fair.
I think last year we watched a good few. I'd say at least 6 or 7 we watched last year.
Wow.
In the one day. But it was at my bestie's house, and she's got reclining chairs, so we just had to stop halfway through the movies and take a wee nap, and then so we were refreshed for the next one.
Quite right.
But it was good fun. It was nice and Christmassy, and especially after I had just come out of like isolation, and I was just feeling a bit sorry for myself, so that just made it even better.
It is, and it's funny how, like, because it sounds mental, especially when I say I went to see Shang-Chi by myself, like spending 10 days trapped in a room by myself. So to celebrate, I went to a bigger room by myself and watched the movie when I'd been watching movies when I was in isolation as well. But there is just, it does hit a bit different, I think, when you are free. And obviously you went to your best friends, and I went to the actual cinema rather than just being in my room. And I think just like that experience of watching something, knowing that you're like free, is just like...
Yep. It was nice. So leading on from that, was there any movies that you missed in the cinema that you wanted to see in the cinema? Obviously you managed to catch June, which was good, but I've definitely got a couple. One in particular that really annoyed me But do you have any that you missed in cinema?
Yes. So I mean, I will only talk about it briefly. The first one, anyway. I've written three down that I could think of. First one, obviously, The Green Knight.
Of
I
course.
do regret not seeing, even though like I could have seen that in a cinema and I chose not to. That was my own fault. But like, it was such like again, it's such a visual movie that as I was even watching it on Prime, I was like, oh, I made a mistake here.
Yeah.
I misjudged this one, and that's where I guess I hurt myself by not watching like any trailer for it, was because I might have been then tempted to see it in the cinema having watched the trailer, but it is what it is. The other two, one of them was one that I did see, and one of them was one that I didn't. The one that I did see, so I didn't even. This movie's got like loads of love, and I like the fact that it has.
Hmm.
I didn't love it nearly as much as I thought I was going to. I liked it; it was enjoyable enough, but I like it doesn't really hold that special place in my heart. But I feel like I would have enjoyed it a lot more. Because I was thinking about this, and I was like, I feel like I would have enjoyed it much more if I'd seen it in a cinema. I think it
Hmm.
would have really benefited from having like an audience. And that's the Mitchells versus the Machines, the animated movie from Sony Animation, but it's like produced by like Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who done like Jump Street and the Lego Movie, and I think they
Hmm.
produced Into the Spider Verse as well. And the anim like the movie itself, like the animation is like jaw dropping. Like it does some really cool things with animation. It's very unique. There's a lot of like there are a lot of good jokes and stuff in there. Like I did laugh a lot. And then when the movie like shifts gears and becomes emotional, that also resonated. I think, but I do think the movie has like a lot of humor. And I think the hit miss ratio was a lot more off than it usually is for me with these movies.
Oh yeah.
And I think there was something about like the overall story and maybe the characters that I just didn't love, which is a shame. But again, I feel like if had I seen it, because it was just came on Netflix and I just watched it on Netflix. But I think had I watched it in like a big screen with an audience, I feel like I would have actually connected with the movie a bit more. I think I would have
Hmm.
got a lot more from it. And again, the movie is visually so interesting that I think it would have also benefited from like the biggest and the best presentation possible. So that's another one. And then the last one was something that I've just not seen at all, but was quite keen to, and that's the French Dispatch, the Wes Anderson movie.
Okay.
Um, so again, like I know like next to nothing about it, but it got like relatively good reviews, and it's got Timothy Chalamet in it, and right now I'm a fan of his. So I was keen to see it, and I just missed it because like it came out. I mean, like what was it between October and November? There's everything was in, like everything seemed to come
Yeah.
out. It was just like a month or two where like there were just floods of movies, and I was going to the cinema like at least once a week, and I was just like, like
You can't
who
keep up.
feasibly, yeah, I was like, who feasibly can go to like going to the cinema more than that? Um, is like that's already quite a lot to go to the cinema.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
yeah, there were just movies that like I didn't get the chance to see. I think by the time that like I would have had the time to see it, I think they weren't showing it that long because I think it was a sort of limited release type thing. So
Yeah.
that was one that was a bit sad that I missed. So what are your picks?
So the one that always sticks out is Halloween Kills. And I'm so mad that I didn't see it because I knew it was coming out. I obviously
Yeah,
knew when it was coming out. But I think what had happened is I decided that kind of early October was too early. And then
yeah,
October rapidly passed me by. And then we were on, I went on holiday at the end of October. And then by the time I got back, it was obviously still I was still at work. So you need, and then because it was kind of after Halloween, the showings were really late. Like they would start at 10 o'clock at night.
oh my god,
Yeah, and I'm like, I don't have the strength to do that, and then get up and go to my work the next day.
yep. Well,
um, I was really mad about that because the original Halloween is probably up there with like top 10 favorite movies. I really like the reboot, which is obviously just called Halloween as well.
yeah, I really
Um,
dug the reboot.
and so I think I had such high hopes for this, and I still haven't seen it. And I've tried to avoid everything about it. 'Cause sometimes I'll see pictures of it, and I'm like quickly scrolling by things.
Yeah.
That being said, though, I haven't really heard any reviews or anything like that, so I'm not sure if I'm really like missing much of that. I can't think of any good or bad reviews that I've really read about it. So maybe it was a good
I,
thing that I'd missed it. But
I've heard opinions, but I won't share them if you don't want to know.
Okay. I can imagine it seems like the kind of movie that would be very like you've kind of gotten into it and accepted it for what it is and loved it, or you were like, that was more than a bit trash.
Well, I mean, I have like a really weird relationship with the Halloween franchise anyway.
Yeah.
So I can't say that I would have gone to see it. It's one of those films that man, I would have rather seen that than Venom 2. It's not something that I would like seek out because I think I've only seen the original Halloween like properly once
Yeah.
when I was about 14. And I can't remember if I've ever mentioned this before, but like I didn't love it.
No.
Surprisingly, like no, I think like it's definitely the sort of film I need to rewatch. But I really didn't. I think obviously the movie deliberately spends a very 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 long time building up, which is again, and I think when I watched it when I was like 14, I was just looking for like cheap horror because that was like the first time I was ever getting into horror, and I just wanted things to sort of be gory and in your face and scary.
Yeah.
So I think I didn't really like
Yeah,
the sort of
Halloween's definitely, it's
slowness
not
of it.
gory at all. Halloween,
No,
it's
no.
definitely a very like slow burn.
Yeah, because I also didn't. I know I also didn't like The Shining that much the first time I saw it.
Same.
And I think it's just. Yeah, and I think it's also the fact that like so many of the iconic moments you've also seen in things like The Simpsons and stuff
Yeah.
as well, so you don't even get like the full impact. But the thing that really annoyed me as well about Halloween was I've never liked the fact that Michael Myers basically becomes like supernatural at the end.
That
He
he
goes
like,
from this
refuses
like
to die, yeah.
yeah, and it just that to me like undermines a lot of like what the movie was supposed to make it quite creepy. I like that the creepiness being that he was just a guy, but when it sort of takes that turn to like, the supernatural, that like yeah, I never really dug it, and as a result, never like watched any other Halloween movies. But I really really liked the new one, the 2018 one.
Yeah.
I'm probably the only person you'll find who likes that more than the original. And but yeah, like I liked obviously that movie inverts a lot of like what happens and sort of faces the mythology head on and stuff, and I appreciated that. Like I felt like it did a really good job of sort of like yeah, I thought it was a really nice bookend to like the first one, and that was why when they announced that they were doing Halloween Kills, that's what it's called, isn't it? Halloween Kills.
Yeah.
I was just like, I actually don't want to see this because I really like didn't dig the first one. Really did dig the remake. I was like, this is probably a good place to like leave Halloween be.
Yeah.
I'm happy with where it left it.
I think the 2018 one was interesting as well because it kind of like when you think of horror movies, that kind of final shot of the final girl getting away and she always looks so happy and relieved, whereas Halloween, the 2018 one, was very much like this ruined her entire life. It's ruined her relationship with everyone she knows. Like that's probably what it would be like if you had had that horrible experience where all of your pals were dead. You had to fight for your life basically. So
yeah, well,
Yeah.
there's a video game series called Dead Space, and I remember when they announced that they're making a sequel, when they announced they're doing like the second one. I remember following like a lot of the development and a lot of the interviews and stuff where they were talking about it, and they said in that they were like, yeah, so the main character's got PTSD because like
As you
obviously,
would. Yeah.
they were like, yeah, he's not mentally okay after the events of the first one, and I was like, I remember thinking, I was like, that's really interesting because yeah, you don't a lot of horror franchises do just have like the main character will be like they're toughened
They
because
get
of, like, what
hardened,
happened
yeah.
yeah, and to an extent, like Laurie is like that in Halloween, but I like the fact that it shows that her reacting that way also is really damaging to her and everyone around her.
Yeah.
So there's appropriate like fallout from the first movie. It gives the first movie a lot of weight, which I appreciate.
So I'm annoyed that I missed that, and I don't know if I'll maybe just wait till next Halloween and then angrily watch it in my house.
Well, they might because I think it's because the next one, the last one, I think it's like supposed to be like part 1 and 2 basically. I can't remember what the last one's called, so they might do a double feature. You might get the chance to see it back to back.
That would be nice. Fingers crossed.
Exactly.
And then the other one I wanted to mention was Last Night in Soho. I just kind of saw that in like trailers and stuff, so I don't know a huge amount about it, but it's Edgar Wright that does it, and he's got such a very specific
Yeah.
style, which I I think would be really nice to see in the cinema, even if the movie wasn't amazing. It would be very like cinematic.
It's definitely the sort of movie that does warrant like a big screen showing. Me and my flatmate went out of our way to make really went out of our way. Yeah, I think we went, like, you're talking about late night showings. I think we went to like a late night showing of that because it was like the only times where our schedules aligned, and we both really wanted to see it. Because again, I think we were like, this movie's not going to be in cinemas long, and it wasn't.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's again, it's an unfortunate one to miss. But because it does, like, if you're going to see the movie, and I will probably be mentioning it again further down the line in this podcast, but if you're going to see that movie, it is probably the best way to see it is on a big screen. So fair.
So that was annoying, but oh well.
Yeah, not to rub salt in the wound.
I know, ouch. It was a weird one because by the time it was kind of like on my radar, it was like almost out of cinemas. So yeah, but oh well. So moving on from there, what for you was the best movie that you saw for the first time this year? And I know you're going to choose Water Babies, so we can skip the discussion for that because we've spoken about it at length. But so that could be a movie you saw one of your releases, or a movie that you just saw for the podcast, or just a movie you watched on your own. So fire away.
I tried to generally avoid ones that we talked about on the podcast as much as possible, just for the sake of again being more interesting. Yeah. Like discussion wise, one that I guess has overlap with the podcast. I think there's a couple that I've got a number written down. But one that has like overlap with the podcast is obviously we watched the first Raid movie for one of the podcasts. I watched the second one. The Raid 2 is also absolutely terrific. It builds on so much that the first one sets up in a really, really cool way. It's interesting because I would say the first one is like as perfect an action movie as you're ever going to get, because as again we talked about in the podcast, just from the very, very start, it's so like efficient. The movie's like so tight, does not waste like any time, and still manages to tell like an interesting story while having like relentless action. The second one is paced very differently. Mm-hmm. The second one has like a lot more space between like all the fight scenes, all the action scenes. So I can understand, because there's people who obviously say they prefer the first Raid over the second one. There's people who say they prefer the second over the first one. The second one has a better story. The second one goes more interesting places, and the individual action scenes are better. But the first one is like this perfectly like contained action movie. So it's a very, very good companion piece to the first one. Definitely one to check out, and one of the films I enjoyed the most this year. Some other ones that I wanted to mention, I watched the movie Molly's Game, the Aaron Sorkin film starring Jessica Chastain. That was fantastic. That was recommended to me by the same guy that recommended I Care a Lot, and it's like the opposite end of the spectrum, because Molly's Game is a genuinely very like well written, very clever movie, and I was really, really entertained with that film. Like again, it's Aaron Sorkin, who is like, he is one of the best sort of like screenwriters around. And it is him like at his best. I'd say like it's one of my favorites of his. So yeah, absolutely loved Molly's Game. And obviously it being based on true events does make it more interesting as well. Some other ones, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. I can't remember if I've talked about that on the podcast before, the Shane Black film.
I don't think so.
So that came out in about 2005-ish. It stars Robert Downey Jr. and Val Kilmer. I think that's basically what like resurrected Robert Downey's career, which got him like noticed and then got him cast in Iron Man. And Shane Black then directed Iron Man 3 with Robert Downey Jr. in it. But Kiss Kiss Bang Bang is like, it's just like one of the funnest movies, one of the funniest movies that I watched all year. Yeah, like again, like I was genuinely like laughing out loud for a lot of it, which whenever I'm watching a movie by myself, I tend not to do, even if I find it funny. I just don't actually laugh out loud. But that movie genuinely had me like laughing a lot. And it's just, it's again, it is quite clever, it's quite fast, it's quite witty. So yeah, it's just a really enjoyable time. Other ones, like I watched Jackie Brown, the Tarantino movie. Tarantino, obviously, pretty much always a good time. It was nice to watch a film of his that I hadn't seen. And I would say it's probably one of like the lower ranking films of his, but it's still a Tarantino movie. So I still like just enjoyed, just enjoyed the absolute hell of it. hell out of it.
Yep.
Other ones are Heat, the Michael Mann film, which is, again, always receives like endless acclaim. And I'm not that big fan of either Robert De Niro or Al Pacino. So I kind of
So
went
not
into it with a
the
bit.
not the Sandra Bullock and Melissa McCarthy one though.
No, but I have seen that film as well, funnily enough. I think it's actually, if only. But yeah, no, Heat is like was excellent. It's like nearly 3 hours long, and I was really really impressed at how efficient a movie it is. Like the actual writing of it was like really really tight, and it felt like for a movie that is that long, it felt like there was loads that like could have actually been like fleshed out and expanded upon. Felt like the movie was like running as fast as it could to give you everything you needed to know as you needed to know it. So it's just, yeah, I was just very impressed by like how such a long movie could feel like so short. And then another two big ones that I want to mention are Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which again always kind of like crops up on like best film lists. And again, I was really really surprised at how, like, because to begin with I wasn't like loving it. It took a while for me to really start to like appreciate the film. But like by the time the movie finished, I was like, I absolutely loved it. I can
Such a good
see
movie.
why. Yeah, I can see why it gets all the praise that it gets. And then the last one that I wanted to talk about, which again I think I've meant to mention it on a podcast, but I don't think I have mentioned it, is the Nicolas Cage movie Mandy.
I haven't even heard of it, to be honest.
Didn't think you would. I mean, I have a Blu-ray of it that I bought some time ago, because HMV are like the only, like literally it came with like a sticker on it saying like limited Blu-ray release, because it's like it's such a small movie that it has HMV. I think are the only people that have like released the Blu-ray of it. So it is like literally like
Amazing.
limited to their shops, which is why I picked it up, because I'd heard from a friend of mine from the first time I was at uni studying film. I've got a friend who's naturally a massive film nerd, and he had talked for years about just like how good a movie it was. And yeah, I'd waited. I just had the movie like sitting on a shelf for ages, and then I had a friend round, and he also was quite keen to see it, and I think we were just like, well, we'll just put it on. And it's such a weird movie. Like it's really really trippy, like really really trippy. But visually it is just like utterly jaw dropping. It's one of the most like visually interesting movies I've ever seen, and Nicolas Cage is phenomenal in it, which is not something that you can always say about Nicolas Cage. Yeah, exactly. He is like, he genuinely does, like, he has some really really like great scenes in it. Like there's scenes where, and he gets a little bit Nicolas Cagey towards the end, but it does actually work for like the tone of the film and and also with everything that sort of happens in the film, it's also quite justified. So it doesn't take you out the experience really. But yeah, Mandy's one that probably is not on many people's radars, but absolutely should be. It's again, even if like it or hate it, like you will have an opinion on it. But like it or hate it, I think you will like the visuals alone are enough to just like you will be kept hooked.
No, very interesting. I find this one actually really quite hard, because I think I've sort of like subconsciously watched a lot more TV than maybe movies this year, just because you're stuck in the house, so it's easier to just pick a kind of TV show and just run with that.
Yeah.
But obviously, the minute you mentioned Raid, that was amazing. Like I'm not like massive on action movies, but that movie was just amazing. Another movie I watched for the first time was Rush Hour, which I really enjoyed.
Oh, I've not seen that.
I have been avoiding it for years. Ryan keeps telling me, oh, it's really funny, but he made me watch I think, was it Shanghai Noon or something, and it was god awful.
I love Shanghai Noon.
No.
Yeah, no. To be fair, I have not seen it since I was a kid. I watched it loads as a kid. I remember absolutely loving it then. have not seen it since that or the sequel, but
I had
do
to
like
I had to
properly have
ask
a
to
soft
turn it
spot for it.
off. Like it was just awful. So that's why I was so panicky
Fantastic.
about watching Rush Hour, because I thought, oh god, that's going to be the same. But I watched it and I really enjoyed it. Like I properly was laughing out loud at points. And then we watched the second one, which I also really enjoyed.
Fair.
And then another one. This is the one that kind of sprung to my mind because it was one that I kept asking people if they'd seen, and that was Jojo Rabbit,
Oh, brilliant.
which I feel like you would have appreciated because you're a big
Yep.
fan.
I am indeed.
This was funny because I kind of roughly knew what it was about, but I wasn't sure how it was going to play out, because I think from my understanding of the kind of trailers was that this little boy, it's like a member of the Nazi party or whatever, but he's got his imaginary friend as Hitler. And I think it did such a good job, because it was really, obviously it was about the kind of Second World War and whatnot, but it was somehow equal parts kind of like very, very funny, but also very sensitive and respectful. And there were points that were like horribly sad. Like,
Yeah.
you've seen it, haven't you? Yeah.
Yeah, so I went to the cinema to see it, and
So-
I sorry.
No, sorry, I was going to say, so there's one point, if you've seen it, obviously you'll know what bit that I'm talking about, but it's properly like a gut punch. And in a movie about World War II, I feel like it would be quite difficult to get just one kind of moment of, like, one giant moment of like pure like kind of sadness, like you did in that movie, which I thought was very well done.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like I'm a huge fan of Taika Waititi. Like watched most of his main movies to date, and I was really surprised at how, like, I was expecting it to be a lot funnier, Jojo Rabbit, because again most of his movies are like predominantly comedies, and again there is like humor there, and some of the humor is just like really, really sort of nuts. What was it, the joke about
Like there's that really funny bit
clones?
when they go in. I thought it was so funny when they go in and the wee boy opens the door and there's like like a line of these kind of Nazi officers, and they come in and each of them does the kind of Heil Hitler thing, and he does it back, and
Heil
it goes
Hitler
on
thing.
for like a whole 5 minutes, and it's so funny. I think it's Stephen Merchant as well, and
Yeah,
he's very funny.
Yeah, he's brilliant. But yeah, as you say, like I was not, and it sounds mental to say, like when it's a movie about World War Two, and like the exact story that it tells as well. But I was not expecting it to go to the places that it went, and
Yeah.
not only does it go there, but as you say, like it delivers it really effectively. Like I'm assuming when the bit you were talking about was the bit with the shoes.
Yes.
And that is set up so perfectly, and then like delivered, like, because I'm pretty sure I remember thinking at one point, I was like, the movie is like referenced these shoes a couple times, like what is the payoff going to be, but I did not expect it to pay off the way it does. And yeah, I was impressed at just like how much it managed to like poke fun at like so much of like what happened and all of the horrible aspects and stuff, but at the same time it did handle it with like a real sensitivity, and it really did take the subject matter seriously in its own way. So yeah, I thought it was a really well balanced movie. Like it shouldn't have, you like, again, just like it should never have been something that works the way that it does. It's just like this really, really weird cocktail of all these, like, again, like really dark, really like contrasting like ingredients, and it manages to like blend them, balance them perfectly. So that's a very good pick.
I think as well, because you kind of see it through the eyes of a child, but it's managed not to be like condescending or anything. It doesn't kind of shy away from like horrifying parts of the story, which is nice. But yeah, I really enjoyed it, and it's definitely one of those movies where everyone you meet, I'm like, have you seen Jojo Rabbit?
Yeah, fair, very fair.
Yeah. So on the flip side of that, is there a movie you saw for the first time this year that you didn't like?
Yes,
I can imagine.
There have been several. So I mean, every movie that I watch, I generally like. I feel like I usually get something from. Like I tend not to watch. I can't think of anything that I really watch that like is absolutely like offensively appalling. Like, you know, even movies like I Care a Lot, and Venom 2 and Eternals and stuff. They still have moments in them that I'm like, I appreciate that like scene or that moment or that idea or that bit of acting or that bit of direction. Like there's always moments in films that like I will enjoy, I'll appreciate. So like when you know, these movies that I talk about, I don't like. I'm not like, oh my god, these movies are absolutely terrible. They'd be on like a list of like the worst films of all time. But personally, my reaction to them was just I did not enjoy them. Like I did not connect with them, and I think that's the main thing is like movies are subjective because it's all about connection. You know, you look for something. You know, you look for resonance, and I just didn't really find that with these films. So again, the big one that I kind of hinted at before, the one that stopped me from going to see The Green Knight in the cinema, was the Paul Thomas Anderson film, The Master, with Joaquin Phoenix and Philip Seymour Hoffman. Again, like movie that is like, you know, there's so much like acclaim around it, and I just did not care for it at all. I really struggled through it. Like I watched it in so many bits and really had to push to get through to it because I was hoping that like the end, again, so I've seen movies that like I haven't really enjoyed that much and then like they have actually tied things up in a surprisingly like satisfying way and I've like walked away with some appreciation. In fact, I talked about that in a podcast before with that movie The Cankerman. No, that's not what it's called, but that's how I remember it.
Yep.
Where it actually had like a surprisingly solid payoff that sort of saved it for me. But yeah, The Master for me was just like incredibly dull, but more than that, like I think that the issue is it's such a character piece, and I just did not like either of the two characters, and I wasn't that interested in them. And in the movie has like intelligent things that it wants to say, and it's saying them intelligently, but at the same time, I just don't really care about the stuff that it's saying.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like it just the movie did too much to kind of put me off, and not enough to really pull me in. It just didn't really work for me. Another one, well, two actually that I'll mention. In contrast to Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, I watched another couple of Charlie Kaufman films. I'm Thinking of Ending Things was his most recent film, which is on Netflix. And again, like that was a movie that again watched with my ex, and I remember we watched half of it one night, and then the next night I think she wanted to watch the second half. And I was up for watching the second half because again I was like, you know, we've started watching it now, we might as well like see it through. But I remember she was like, well, we need to see, because it's like, oh, the movie's doing a lot of weird things, we need to watch the second half so we can like see the explanation. And I remember I don't think I said it, but I was like,
you're not gonna get an explanation.
Yeah, I was like, don't think it's that kind of movie. And I was very much right.
Yeah.
And then afterwards we sat online, the two of us, and we were like reading just loads of analysis and dissection on it, and we read a comment which hit the nail on the head so perfectly, and it basically said, this is a really interesting movie to discuss and to read about, but it's not that interesting a movie to watch. And
amazing.
That's the problem. And another Kaufman film that I watched and really did not like vibe with was Synecdoche, New York, I think it's called. Weird title, weird movie.
Yeah.
Again, just like it's just weird. It's just overly weird, and again, there are people out there who absolutely love it because it just strikes the right chord with them. I think that's the thing with these movies, like they need to just strike a chord with you, and if they don't, then you're just sitting through something that just feels really pretentious and really pointless.
Did he do adaptation?
Yes, he did.
Oh Lord, I had to watch that when I was in uni, and that was the moment where I was like, nah, I'm done with him.
Yeah, fair. I've not seen adaptation, but I'm not gonna look out any more of his work.
I struggled through it, like properly struggled through it.
Yeah, I think it's just I appreciate that a filmmaker like that exists and gets money and gets to make these projects. Interesting that happens, and I'm glad that there are people that obviously connect to it. But yeah, it's just not for me.
Yep,
at all. I think the other like ones I had, I watched at the start of the year. I tried to watch a bunch of Martin Scorsese films to really give him a chance. Never really been that big a fan of his, and watching more of his films did not change that. There were some of his films that I quite enjoyed Casino, That was a surprise, to be honest. It was another one of his that I like enjoyed. Raging Bull was all right. I didn't like love it. And then I watched Hugo, which was actually the film of his that I was probably the most interested in seeing. I remember like being interested in seeing that when it came out at the time. But it just that like I mean I don't really like Scorsese films because a lot of them are like gangster films and I don't really care about gangster films. Hugo's very much not that.
Yeah.
It's like a kids film, but it does kind of feel like to me it kind of felt like Martin Scorsese was making a kids film and was being very much like, oh, it's a kids film. I think there's like the opening. There's like a running Sacha Baron Cohen plays this like conductor sort of like railway person who has like a dog and chases Hugo about, and there's just like long chase sequences that are just sort of like over the top and. Again, I could just imagine Scorsese being like, the kids are gonna eat this up, and it's just wasn't doing it for me at all. So
I remember, I remember kind of watching it around the time it came out, and I remember I can't remember what age I'd have been, but I do remember the time watching it thinking this looks weird, like obviously before like I'd gone to uni and stuff like that, but I do distinctly remember the time being like stylistically this is very weird, and it was so weird that it was like jarring and you couldn't enjoy the movie because of it.
Yeah, I think you're right with that, to be fair. It does have this like, there's just almost an implacable sort of like weirdness about it that just doesn't really, it doesn't feel like it feels like it's almost like Scorsese's trying to do like a Spielberg movie. But just isn't managing to successfully ape the style that he's trying to ape. That to me was like what I kept getting, and it just felt like someone trying to do a Spielberg film but not succeeding, and it just didn't really work. And again, like I like the cast, I like pretty much all the actors in it, particularly Asa Butterfield and Chloe Grace Moretz, and again like Sacha Baron Cohen. But I just did not think it was a very good film.
Fair.
Another one that actually I'll stop there because like I'm gonna start repeating myself. What were your picks?
I genuinely only had written down one because this was the reason I wanted to discuss this movie, so that was the reason why this particular topic was in. And that movie was Bill and Ted's, I think it's called Most Excellent Adventure. Have you seen it?
Wait, is that which one is that? The first one?
The first one.
The first one?
Yeah.
Oh really? So I have not seen it since I was a kid. I remember like really, really liking that and the second one. But I will say I went to go see the third one in cinemas last year and really did not dig that.
No.
So I've not gone back to Bill and Ted since.
The reason I wanted to watch it, it's always on those kind of like must watch lists or kind of best comedies, and it just was not the kind of comedy that I would enjoy. It was very much like overly like stoner comedy kind of thing, which sometimes you can get into, they're funny, but this was just like from the word go it was like ha ha ha, these guys are really sick as mints, and it just I could not get into it. I just didn't think it was funny. I thought one of my notes here is it felt like it was going everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Like there was a lot going on, but at the same time, it was almost like they were focusing all the screen time on the phone box and missing all of the action, everything that could be fun.
Yeah,
it felt very like, and then I don't know whether I was just zoning in and out, but you would go back to it and there would just be like 3 or 4 new people in the phone box. And I'm like, how did you even get them? Like, when did you go and get them? I remember I watched it with Ryan, my fiance, and we literally did that thing where we were just sitting in like a bored silence the whole time. Yeah. Neither of us really wanting to say, I'm not feeling this.
Yeah. That's unfortunate.
Yeah. So needless to say, I haven't seen any of the other ones, and I probably won't watch the newest one.
That's fair. The second one was my favourite. I can't really remember tons about. Yeah, I watched the second one first though, weirdly. And the second one, like, is weird. It's a very, very, very weird movie. I'm now curious to rewatch them to see if like my reaction to them will be completely different. So I literally have not seen them since I was a kid, but I do remember like really liking the second one, and I think I liked the first one, but definitely not as much as I like the second one. But I think that's usually, I think that happened to me with a lot of films. If I watched like a second one first and then the first one after, but yeah, fair. Unfortunate.
But yeah, no, that was genuinely the only one that I wanted to discuss for that part. I'm sure there are many others that I saw this year that I didn't enjoy. One of them, actually, I'll just mention very briefly, was, I can't even remember what it was called. Was it Motherless Brooklyn or something? It was Edward Norton, I think, that directed it, and it was dreadful. Like, I had to turn it off. It was that bad.
Oh my god.
And I had such high hopes. I was like, oh, it looked good. It wasn't really the kind of movie that I would have gone for, but I was like, Edward Norton's amazing. But they should maybe just, I think, stick to that acting, because it was one of the most boring movies I've ever seen, and I only watched about 20 minutes, half an hour of it.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Says it all, really.
So yeah, after that scathing review, the next section was just, and I have a funny feeling that we're going to want to discuss the same movies. This section was just kind of if there was a movie that you wanted to discuss for whatever reason, whether you loved it, you hated it, you thought it was worth discussing. So yeah, it's just kind of very open, this one. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts, because I think I know what you're talking about, so I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
Okay, so just to be interesting, I'm going to throw you a curveball.
Okay.
Have you seen Don't Look Up?
I haven't, not yet. It only came out on Boxing Day, didn't it?
It did, yeah. It came out like only just
or Christmas
dropped.
Eve, I think.
Yeah, I think it was Christmas Eve. I watched it. I watched it all yesterday, which is the first time in like a long time that I've just sat down and just in my room.
I've never known you to watch a movie the whole way through.
Well, exactly. It's very much not like me. I will say, like, it wasn't that. I'm not gonna like diss the movie in any way. It wasn't like so captivated that I had to watch the whole thing in one go. Mm-hmm. I wanted to watch it before doing this podcast, Justin, because I didn't know if you would have seen it or not. But the movie was getting a lot of chatter, and I was curious. Can I ask, what do you know about the movie?
Not a thing. Only the cast. I know, obviously, Leonardo DiCaprio, Jennifer Lawrence, Meryl Streep. That's about it. I don't even really know what genre. I think, is it comedy? Or are there comedic moments?
It's kind of a comedy, yeah, but quite a dark comedy. But yeah, it's because there's definitely like a lot of humor in it. And again, some of it lands more than others. But there's some like pretty solid jokes in there, I thought. Yeah, no, I also knew very little about it. I'd just seen that there was like positive buzz around it, and I'd seen a couple comments just discussing nothing relating to the plot really, but just discussing like the relevance of like its sort of message. And it's funny because I very, very quickly like pieced together what like I thought the plot was going to be, like what I thought where I sort of thought like the broad narrative was going to go. And then by the end I was like, okay, well I was weirdly accurate with that. Yeah, it was quite surreal, but at the same time, like there was a lot of like specific moments and like character based things that like I didn't expect and see coming, didn't like know where things were gonna go. It's funny because before watching it I was like, I feel like I'm going to like this movie as a talking point more than I'm going to like this movie as a movie, and that was exactly how I felt about it by the end of it. I was like, I'm glad I watched it, but I'm glad I watched it because I feel like there'll be a lot of discussions where it comes up, and it'll be interesting to have those discussions. But I feel like I'm not gonna like probably never rewatch the film. It's not a bad film. Like again, it's very divisive. But yeah, I think it's definitely one worth watching.
It's definitely on my list. I was a bit funnily enough, I was a bit miffed when I saw that it came out on Christmas Eve, because I was like, oh, when am I meant to have time to watch that?
Yeah, I really, really like properly squeezed it in, because I was like, I really want to. I didn't know if you'd have seen it or not. I was like, I want to watch it just in case. And again, I'm glad that I did watch it because no, I could be part of the conversation. But yeah, with that out of the way, shall we talk some Ridley Scott?
Let's do it.
Because I mean, to be fair to the man, like impressive as all hell that he's got 2 films out within like the span of like a month. Granted, pretty sure that is because one of them, I think The Last Duel, was supposed to come out in 2020, and then obviously the pandemic delayed things. But yeah, he obviously released that and House of Gucci, and I don't know if you're the same, but weirdly I saw them like in reverse from the way that they were released. Like I saw House of Gucci first and then The Last Duel.
Same. Did you see House of Gucci in the cinema?
I did see House of Gucci in the cinema.
Same.
And yeah, let's talk about House of Gucci first then, since we both watched it first. I did not love the film. Didn't hate it. Again, like there was, and again it's like such a weird one. It's the movie was very like all over the place. It felt. Funnily enough, I was watching. I don't know if it might be Vanity Fair that had done it. They're doing like a series on like directors on directors. So they get like 2 directors and they will literally like interview each other. Like Denis Villeneuve and James Cameron have one, which I've watched most of and is really good. But Bradley Cooper and Ridley Scott have one, cool. And I watched that literally just before filming this.
That'd be good because they both worked with Lady Gaga.
Exactly, and they spent most of the time talking about. They spent most of the time talking about The Last Duel, but they did mention House of Gucci. I know I was really surprised that they didn't spend more time talking about House of Gucci, but one thing I thought funny in that was Ridley Scott mentioned the fact that I think it was his wife found the book that the movie's based on, and they went through about 6 different screenwriters before they found like the guy that they then hired to write the script. And they said that he wrote it in something like 6 weeks, and Ridley Scott was like, and the one thing he absolutely nailed was the tone. I was like, did he?
Yeah.
Because tonally, what was that film?
That was my main issue with it, is that it didn't. Yeah. It had no idea what it was.
Exactly. It was because it was some parts of it were so, and this is the thing. Like, it felt like everyone in the movie thought they were in a different movie. Because like. Some of the characters, some of the actors were up here, and some of the others were like so low and grounded.
Yeah, here's Jared Leto, like way down here, and then here's every other performer.
And it's nuts because like Jared Leto is just giving this like ridiculous, like over the top, like mental performance. Yeah. But then you have other, like, again, it felt like Adam Driver gives like such a sort of like muted performance. Like he's really sort of reserved, and again, Adam Driver's a terrific actor, but again, it feels like he's doing very little, and it's just so weird to have like the movie jump between these characters because like they are very much just like it is like they're in different films, and it's like some parts of the film it feels like it's going for this like really serious like almost like Game of Thrones type like
like this family kind of
social
dynasty
politics
kind of thing.
Exactly, and all these like betrayals and backstabbings and stuff, and then other times it feels like it's just being this really like sort of camp like fun sort of like biopic movie, and even like the style is really weird. Like I noticed like the color palette, like some parts are like really like it feels like there's a really like grey tone to a lot of like scenes, but then you also have like scenes that are really sort of golden brown, and again it just felt like the palette was like jumping about a bit, but like inexplicably, like there never seemed to be any like reason for it. I mean, the accents were all over the place. The most egregious one I thought, which I don't think I've really seen a lot of people talk about, but the one that really, really bothered me, and to be fair, he's not in it very long, but Jeremy Irons.
He could not keep a hold of that. Whatever accent he was trying to do, he could not keep a hold of it.
It was so British, with just like the smallest like twinge of Italian. It was so bad.
And Jeremy Irons has got such a distinct, like, obviously he's the voice of Scar, and his voice is very, very distinct, and he's very, very English.
Yep. Exactly. So yeah, like he was the one that really like pulled me out the film.
I feel like my issue, I'm not a fan of Jared Leto at all, but I feel like his accent was very like almost in like a Domino sauce advert kind of
Yeah.
accent that he had going on, and and he was doing like this, like, do
Yeah.
Italian people actually do that? Like,
Well, no, this is the thing. So like, I feel like the story that it's telling and it being a true story should be played seriously, because especially with the message that the movie is trying to deliver, which that was the thing as well. Was again, it was another movie I went to see it was for my flatmate's birthday, and afterwards we went for some drinks and we spent a lot of time discussing it, and we both were like, we both had pretty much the same reaction to the film, which was like we didn't love it, but it was really interesting to talk about because it does have it does have like a really, it knows what it wants to say and it does deliver it effectively in a lot of ways, and about corruption and power and all that, and but at the same time, like, as much as that's the story that it wants to tell and that should be taken seriously and handled seriously and delivered seriously, I'm also not the biggest Jared Leto fan, but I actually really enjoyed him in that movie. And I think part of that came from the fact I didn't even realize it was Jared Leto until most of the way through the movie, because you had said to me, you'd mentioned Jared Leto, and my flatmate had mentioned Jared Leto being in it, and I kept thinking, like, I was like, when is Jared Leto going to show up in this movie?
that's amazing.
Like, and there's a character in it who I thought looked a little bit like Jared Leto, and I was like, was that him? And I, like, literally it was like towards the end of the movie, and I was like, wait a second. Hold
That's
on.
hilarious.
Is that? And then I was doubting myself for so long, as I was like, wait, no, is that really him? So I genuinely, like, even though it felt like he did not belong in that movie at all, I was having a lot more fun when he was on screen than I was when most other actors were on screen.
Oh yeah.
It's, yeah, like, those are the parts of the movie that I actually like. And I think one thing the movie had that did quite well, was there's some really interesting transitions in the film. Like, it does a really good job of, like, finding interesting ways to, like, transition scene, and like maybe a character will say something, like, characters talk about, like, a character literally mentions being like a bird, and then it cuts to, like, birds in a cage, that sort of thing. Like, there's like some nice sort of, like, cuts like that. The very best, like, transition the movie has is Jared Leto goes to scream, and when he opens his mouth, you just get the horn of a car, and then it cuts to, like, someone, like, beeping, and I, at the time, I was just, again, I was like, this is from a different movie than the movie I am watching.
100%.
But at the same time, what an, like, again, that's what I mean, like, that the grey washed out palette did not suit that sort of campy, over the top, like, storytelling, but I enjoyed those bits more. So again, the movie just felt all over the place.
100%. I think yeah, it was such a weird one, and I feel like you hit the nail on the head when you were talking about Adam Driver, and his performance was so muted, but because of the way that the movie was going, or where the movie was trying to go all over the joint, it felt like it was so muted that he was almost like just part of the scenery. Like, I can barely remember him being in it, and it just, yeah. I remember as well, I read this really funny review, and it was from Tom Ford, who is obviously a character in the movie because he worked for Gucci in real life. And I remember his review said that he spent a lot of the movie laughing, but he wasn't sure if he should be laughing. And I feel like that's a very accurate kind of description.
Yeah, I think that is, yeah, very spot on. Actually, like,
I think one of the issues as well that I kind of had with it is, like, kind of like you're talking about, I feel like it didn't know what it wanted to do with Lady Gaga's character. It didn't know whether it wanted to make her the villain or a victim. And there were points where I was definitely, like, on her side, and then I had to remember, oh no, wait, she hired a hitman to kill her ex-husband, the father of her children. Like, that's not really on.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah, and even that was like, was it Salma Hayek's character and their relationship, and that was another one. I was just like, every single time they had a scene, I was like, what is going on here? Like, again, just felt like, and then the scene where they hire the hitmen, and it's again played as like a sort of comedic scene, but again, that is like one of the most, like, serious and most important. It's kind of like the big important, like, decision made in the movie. But yeah, you're spot on as well with, like, the movie, not knowing, again, it's kind of like that movie I Care a Lot, where it has like a really unsympathetic lead character, but then which the movie will like at points show you how unsympathetic they are, but then at other points will try and get you to root for them.
Yeah.
And it's like the movie is just working against itself.
Yeah, it was, I think that, and it was funny as well because my bestie pointed this out. She thought that the very end, like the whole kind of court scene, and it's such a good point, that was like 2 seconds long.
Yeah, I know. Like the actual resolution is so rushed, which is mental when you consider how long the film is. And that's the thing. Like that movie did not need to be the length that it was. And again, I was looking at loads of like online discussion, loads of reviews and stuff about it after I'd seen it, and there was reading like everyone was saying effectively the same thing. Like I remember someone pointed out, they were like, why did we need the scene of like Jared Leto and Al Pacino looking for Jared Leto's car? Well, why was that movie? Why was that written? Why was that film? What did it tell us? What did it add? Absolutely nothing. And the movie is nearly 3 hours long. And like it just doesn't. It's just nuts that they found time for that.
Yeah.
And not like in the courtroom scene is like so quickly like like raced through when it is like the big moment.
Yeah. Or even like the actual like shooting itself was like it took up maybe 3 seconds of the runtime.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I get that's what it's about. It's not like you were saying it's about greed and corruption and blah blah blah. But I feel like the murder is the culmination of that.
Yeah. Exactly. And yeah, you're right. It is weird how like it is set up and it's a big focal point, but at the same time it kind of feels like it's almost like swept under the rug really quickly, and it is just odd. A bit like it is very odd movie. So yeah, unfortunately not one of Ridley's best.
Not his best.
But one film that I actually do think is one of his best was The Last Duel. I don't know if you agree, but I was very uncertain about how I felt about it for most of my time watching it. And again, it was one of those films that I watched in chunks. So
I hope you watched it in like 3 neat little sections.
No, if I'd known beforehand that I could have done that, then I might have done that, because that is, and you know that one of the things, since you mentioned this, one of the things that I find really interesting about this movie is that it has 3 writers, and all 3 writers basically took their own part of the movie.
I didn't know that. I knew there was 3 writers, but I didn't know that they had separated it up that way. Oh.
Which never really happens, but they actually pretty much did do that. I mean, there would have obviously been like, they would have obviously had like many meetings and consultations, and I'm sure they all did work on like various parts on it. But but generally, I think for the most part, they wrote like their own like section, which I just think is like absolutely fascinating. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I like really was not sure of like, I had very, very mixed feelings for like most of it, but I really thought that the movie stuck the landing, and I really appreciated what it had to say and the way that it said it, because it is a really like sort of powerful message that it has, and it does deliver it in like an unflinching manner, and I think it's a really like brutal lens to sort of hold up, but it is like a really important one. What were your thoughts on it?
I did enjoy it. I thought there was issues with it, but overall I did enjoy it. And like you, I think one of my main issues with it was the entire first section, when it was kind of focused on Matt Damon's character. For me, it felt like the pacing was just all over the joint in that bit. Yeah,
so that was one thing that I noticed, was like, it was because I was aware going into it, I was like, this movie is going to be like near 3 hours long, and it was crazy to me at first, because I didn't realise going in that it was like going to be split into 3 different like sections the way it was. But I was like, it feels like the movie is covering like so much ground so quickly, and it's not doing a good enough job at like keeping me up with it. Like it basically just like powers through was it Matt Damon and Adam Driver go from like kind of being like colleagues to then being really close friends to then like their friendship deteriorating, and it just all happens like, it's literally like goes from like one scene they barely know each other. The next they're like best friends. The next they're
Yeah.
like there's like trouble with their relationship, and it's every scene you're just like, whoa, how did
Yeah.
we get here?
100%. I feel like his section was definitely the weakest. Just kind of for those reasons. I thought I really liked the kind of like different retellings. I thought that was really nice, and there was little subtle things that you that maybe could have been missed, but like so for example in Matt Damon's part, he's the one that saved Adam Driver's life, but when it's Adam Driver's retelling, he's the one that saved Matt Damon's life.
Yeah.
So just little things like that I thought were really cool. I thought Ben Affleck as a blonde was slightly horrifying. Like honestly, I got the shock of my life when like 20 minutes into his screen time, I was like, is that Ben Affleck?
I know what you mean though, to be because I also didn't realize that it was him for like quite a while into it, and the character he plays as well is like it's not a character I've seen like Ben Affleck play before. He's quite sort of like flamboyant and a bit over the top, and yeah, like I actually really dug that. So he was, I don't know if you know, he was one of the three writers.
Yeah, because it was intended.
Along with
Adam Driver's role was intended for Ben Affleck, wasn't it?
exactly, and he said that he ultimately didn't. They went for Adam Driver, and he didn't go for the role because of the fact that there's such like a publicized relationship between Matt Damon and Ben Affleck that he thought it would be distracting to like audience members, which I appreciate that they like thought of that, and they
yeah. I think it would have been, because I think you would automatically start thinking of like Good Will Hunting and stuff like that, so it would take you out of the movie, I feel.
Yeah, I agree, and it felt like, and I think it would have made Matt Damon feel more like Matt Damon, but whereas I felt like I thought he was really good, and I felt his character again didn't feel like a character that I'd seen Matt Damon play, and again I appreciate how they just do. I felt they did such a good job of showing like how sort of pathetic and just like how the movie like does not shy away from the fact that like he's this like self-righteous, self-important guy who just can't really get anything right, even in his own like
even in his own retelling.
Yeah, and that was something I really liked as well, was the fact that, as you said, there's like differences between the scenes that we see played out, like when they're repeated through like each person's like subjective viewpoint, they play out differently. And the thing that I really liked about that was it wasn't as overt as I think another filmmaker would have made it. Like I thought things like even the characters themselves don't have like even though they are like more, they're more flattering to themselves, they're still not fully flattering. Like, what is it, Matt Damon goes to like kneel before Ben Affleck's character, and then he makes him like shuffle forward into position, like you see.
Or when he's being knighted and he has to tell everyone to shush.
Exactly. Like, yeah, even in his own like subjective retelling, you still like you still get a proper feel of who that character is, and the same as then when obviously it's Adam Driver's like subjective viewpoint, and then again I thought that was really interesting how they made it like small changes, but it's not. They still have like certain things reinforced throughout. But yeah, like I did appreciate, like I think if Ben Affleck had been in Adam Driver's role, then I think it would have been distracting, and I think Matt Damon would have been more Matt Damon-y than he was in the movie.
Yeah. No, definitely. I think as well the whole, like you were saying at the start, the kind of final act, the duel itself was definitely, I think maybe the best part of the movie. I just felt like it was entertaining isn't the right word, but it was everything that you wanted to watch from like a medieval duel, but it didn't feel in my mind cheap or anything, because you did know that, I mean, it took me a minute to realise that she was actually chained to the thing that she was standing in, so like they were just going to do it there and then.
I know, it's pretty horrifying, and like they do a really good job of selling the stakes. I did really appreciate that, because again, not knowing obviously it's based on, I think that's what made it more impactful as well, is the fact that it is based on real events. Is knowing that this actually did happen. It's not like this isn't a fictionalized tale, like this literally is history. And I think it does a really good job of like obviously the message that it's sort of conveying is really powerful, but yeah, it really does set up the stakes. And when they're dueling, I had no idea which one of them was going to win, and I genuinely was like, and that's impressive, I think, for a film, because like a lot of times you can guess the outcome with a movie, but with this, I was like, it could go either way. Like, I don't know if this movie is going to have like a happy ending or a not happy ending, because I could see it doing both. And I really, really did feel the stakes. And as you said, like the duel does deliver. Like it is like I mean, yeah, like it is like a visual, handled really well visually, and all the setup does pay off in that like fight scene, as well, I love the fact that like the whole it builds up to this duel. You have the duel, and then the movie then makes the point, which has already made the point, but reinforces the point that like it was never about the fight, not really. Like it's about like Jodie and the whole like ridiculousness of him celebrating like his vindication basically, but he is celebrating the fact that like she was telling the truth, that she was raped.
Because that was one of the nice little changes where when it was kind of Matt Damon's retelling, he said this is a slight against my wife and then therefore me, but when it was his wife's retelling, it was very much like he's doing that out of, it was a heart against him, like he couldn't have cared less about his wife kind of thing. It was purely because he wasn't doing that for her honor, he was doing it for himself.
He was looking for an opportunity to challenge Adam Driver basically, and that was it. And he was using what happened as like even like, I thought it was pretty horrifying, his reaction to when she tells him that, and then he basically rapes her in that scene because she absolutely does not want to get into bed with him.
I feel like that was the, because like you said, he's like not a very nice character. He's very like, I don't know, he just seemed a bit like horrible and kind of like disgusting, and that was the moment when you were like, oh, that was just like, none of you people are redeeming.
Exactly.
Well, none of the men, are redeeming.
Yeah, literally, and you really do feel for like Jodie Comer's character, and it is one of those as well where I think the interesting thing about it is the movie does such a good job of like explaining the world and the politics around it, which unfortunately aren't like too, they're not as like far removed from like the current day world as you would like to, you'd like to think, but it does a really good job of like selling just like how ridiculously difficult it is for her to even like to come out and like say that this has happened and all the possible like consequences of her doing that. And
because she loses again, like her best friend, she kind of loses her as well. Yeah,
exactly. And even when she, even Jodie Comer's character like comes to sort of realise towards the end, but when she realises like what will happen if Matt Damon loses the duel, and at that point she's pregnant, and she does say, she's like, if I'd known that I was going to have this kid and that this was going to be the consequence, then I would have kept quiet. Like
because there's that really sad scene with Matt Damon's mum when they're in the kind of chapel bit, and she's like, it's happened to us all kind of thing, just why didn't you keep quiet? And then you wonder, is that why she's so horrible?
Exactly, exactly. And I think there's a lot of really good like reaction shots as well when Jodie Comer's like giving her sort of testimony, and it cuts to like female characters and you see the sympathy, and you do again, it's, and even like Adam Driver's line to Ben Affleck when he says, oh yeah, of course there was the customary he said the customary protest, like it's just again, it does a really, really good job of painting like the horrific reality of like just how again like how the world sort of functions. And again, it's just the fact that like you do really feel like the hopelessness of like Jodie Comer's character and like all the women really in like their sort of like experiences. It is like, it does a really good job of like selling just like how absolutely horrible a time that was, and even obviously the mention of the fact that the crime that like Adam Driver like suffers from isn't even like isn't rape itself. It's the fact that like it's the was it the violation of like someone else's property, of Matt Damon's property.
Yeah, yeah, like it wasn't a crime against her. It was against him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which is again just adds to the sort of hollowness of his like celebration at the end, and
Yeah.
even the fact that like he's just so clueless. He's just like over the moon that he's won this duel and he's being celebrated, and she's just she's not exactly loving life because it's yeah, okay, she's not getting burned alive, but at the same time, like she's still been through like such a horrific experience, and
Yeah.
like to have it all be so public and for there to be such a fallout of it. But yeah, I thought very, very like powerful movie, and I thought like, I was really, really worried for a lot of the runtime that it was not going to handle the subject matter it was very clearly going to be handling. It wasn't going to handle it as delicately as it did. And again, I thought it did a really, really good job of saying what it wanted to say in a very sort of like concise manner, but doing it in an appropriate way as well, like a respectful way. So yeah, very much dug it.
Yeah, no, I did enjoy it as well. It was another one similar to House of Gucci. When I initially came away from it, I was like, did I enjoy that? I feel like both these movies are super interesting to discuss. But yeah, I think The Last Duel was an enjoyable movie. Not that I didn't enjoy House of Gucci, but yeah, The Last Duel definitely is up there.
Yeah, exactly. I think yeah, like I think Last Duel does start off quite choppy, but I think when you kind of get, I think it definitely like it could be refined into a better film. I think there's definitely like yeah, you could definitely rework that script into something a bit stronger. But I think at the same time,
I feel like my issue with The Last Duel was the script.
Yeah.
And not really anything else.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's really well directed, really well acted, really well acted, and yeah. But I do think that like, especially at the beginning, like you really, and even like all the reviews and stuff I've seen around it seem to say much the same thing, that like watch the whole movie because like it pays off really well, but to begin with, it does start off on the wrong foot. And I think there definitely is like a smoother way to tell that story. Than what we got. But yeah, I think for me, I think I just appreciated, I guess it goes back to resonance again, like I appreciated like the message that it had to say and the way that it delivered it, and it felt like, even though there is like some like tonal shifting a little bit, like Adam Driver's section it does feel tonally different to what comes before and what comes after, but again that's like an intentional thing, and it feels like the movie's is making a point with that. But yeah, I did feel like The Last Duel knew what it wanted to be a lot more than House of Gucci did.
Yeah, definitely. But no, yeah, that was really interesting. I feel like we could talk about those two movies for an entire podcast. Maybe we'll do a Ridley Scott one soon. That would be good. Ooh.
I know. long overdue, a Ridley Scott one.
Yep. But yeah, no, thank you very much again, Sam, for joining me.
Thank you for
on our little review of 2021.
I know.
Yeah, so I'm excited to see what comes next. We'll be back in 2022 to do more. But yeah, for the time being, see you later. Hope everyone has a good new year.
Yeah, see you next year.
See you next year. Bye.
Farewell.